Okay, we might get started. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to you to this fourth On the Couch discussion to discuss the state of cybersecurity in Australia. And we've got some incredible contributions from our two esteemed panelists this afternoon, which I can't wait to get into. So today's discussion, we're going to be as interactive as possible. And I want to encourage you all to really participate in a number of ways through. So as I've been saying, please make sure you mute your microphone as you come in. You are able to unmute, but we'd prefer you to stay on mute. We will be calling for questions throughout, and we've obviously curated questions as we've gone through when you've registered, and we'll be using those to guide the discussion this afternoon. In the chat function, we'd also encourage you to post questions to the category all panelists and attendees, and we'll use that to aggregate those questions and make sure we get the response all the way through. So make sure you get involved, jump in, and make the most of this great afternoon discussion. So my name is Matt Salier. I'm your moderator and facilitator today. I'm the director of the new Cyber Ready Cloud Innovation Centre here at RMIT University, and also our entrepreneurial hub, the Activator. With me Professor Asha. She's the Associate Dean of Mathematical Sciences at RMIT and an expert in information security. Part of her research interests include the mathematics underpinning quantum cryptography, which I'm sure we'll touch on today, coding theory and risk management, includes the application of algebraic techniques to communications, coding, and information theory, as well as risk management techniques to achieve compliance to anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism. She's a part of an expert UN panel on anti-money laundering and advises on cybercrime, and she's also the founding chair of Women in Maths, and she continues to place a number of initiatives to improve gender equity in a really important area of mathematical sciences. Our other panelist is Sean Duca. Now, Sean is the Vice President and Regional Chief Security Officer for Asia Pacific at Palo Alto Networks. And he works on the development of thought leadership, threat intelligence and security best practices in the IT and the security industry, and is a trusted advisor to organisations throughout the region and indeed the world, helping them improve security postures they have. Prior to Palo Alto, he spent 15 years in a range of roles at Intel Security or McAfee, and his last position was a Chief Technology Officer there for Asia Pacific. And before this, Sean was involved in software development, tech support, consulting services, and a range of internet security solutions. So a huge wealth of experience between our two panelists. So welcome to you both today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I'd like to respectively deliver an acknowledgement to country. And today, as we gather virtually from across all areas of Australia and beyond, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and the Indigenous nations. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the people of the Boiwurrung and the Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of RMIT University. In this time when our Willem, or our meeting place, is dispersed across so many separate homes, I hope you all feel the strong sense of Noogle, belonging, in meeting like this with a community of like-minded people using these wonderful alternative and accessible communication tools such as Zoom. I respectfully acknowledge the lands we're conducting the business today on remain unceded, and acknowledge the First Nations peoples, their ancestors past, present and emerging. So we've got a lot to get through today. This is a critical issue. Before we get to that, Asha, what have you been doing in this work from home environment? You know, give me the lowdown on what I should be watching on Netflix. How's lockdown in Melbourne treating you?
It's pretty good. No, I cannot give you any advice on Netflix since I don't have Netflix. But I can tell you what to watch on SBS On Demand a little bit. So one of the series I watched while I was on leave for a couple of weeks was Hot Zone, which is very timely, and it talks about a possible true event, or rather a true event of a possible pandemic start in the US, in Washington, DC, actually. So it's quite scary, and it's such a precursor to what we are going through right now.
Indeed. How about you, Sean? What's keeping you out of mischief in this unusual time?
Well, to be honest, I think I've probably ended up spending more time. I think I've been more productive actually working from home than I probably have been in the office. So I think I did the count the other day. It was like 130 odd days or whatever I've been working from home. So look, things have been good. You know, security is definitely one thing that never really sort of stops. So I'm just trying to keep myself focused on getting all my work done. And at the same time, it's like, all right, switch my brain off and do something completely different. Yeah.
It's really necessary, right? That balance of, having the same four walls around you and everything else, keeping ourselves balanced. So we've got a lot to get through today. A really critical issue around the future of cybersecurity in the country. And there's a couple of scene setters I wanted to prompt as our thinking goes through. So last month, obviously, we saw our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, identify Australia as a target of a major organised cyber attack emanating from state-based actors, and a simultaneous announcement of an investment of about $1.3 billion in cyber over the next decade to combat this growing risk to the nation's economic sovereignty and security. Last week, we saw the long-awaited release of an influential industry panel around cybersecurity, calling for more responsibility from businesses to ensure our cyber protection of their customers. And there was about 60 recommendations to government to consider as part of that strategy. Monday this week, Michaelia Cash committed to build a cyber army across Australia. 76,000 people needed. This skills gap we have in the sector is really critical, and that transformation of our digital economy really calling out. And then, of course, for me, or many people like me, the fitness fanatics amongst us have had a massive shock with Garmin Connect going down globally as a victim of what appears to be a ransomware attack. So this is omnipresent. And seems to be crossing over all industries and sectors. So Asha, I guess this is just a problem for IT security professionals, right? It's their job, they'll fix it, we'll be okay, or really should we be thinking it's something for everyone to worry about and address?
Every single one of us. It's not just an IT problem, it is our problem. So each of us needs to be aware, each of us needs to do something about it. It's like for many times with physical security, we have to be responsible for our own physical security. If we jump off tall bridges, the chances are we will kill ourselves. So this is the same thing. If we click on a link without thinking about it. So for example, the other day I got 2 emails from PayPal. One said that, one of your credit cards is expiring, so could you please go and fix that? But it didn't have a link. So just said, go to PayPal and log in and fix it. And then another email came from PayPal that said, we need you to confirm your identity, so please click here. So I was like,
and that increased sophistication, Sean. I think, obviously when we talked before, you identified, you're seeing that happen, that it's much more masked in the actions as well. What are you seeing as some of those trends?
Yeah, look, I think, so there's a range of different, let's call them threat actors that are out there. So some people are focused on cybercrime. There's others that are focused on, cyber espionage, hacktivism. There's a range of different types of, cyber threat actors. I think by far we see a lot of it gravitating towards cyber crimes, so financially motivated crimes that are all sort of happening online. So the level of sophistication goes from, kind of to Asha's point, someone just sending an email. It's kind of that whole cast your net as far and wide as you possibly can and pray for the best that someone's going to click on one of those links and maybe divulge too much information, to some more your sophisticated actors that really are looking to poke and prod and work out how do they get inside our organizations. And I think the reality is it's foreseeable that in this day and age that every organization will get targeted. And it's really up to us to ensure that, we're constantly thinking about how do we defend ourselves, how do we limit the overall impact. And to Asha's point, it's not just the IT team or, go off and buy the next box and you're fine. Every single person has a role to play when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's from, the CEO of an organization all the way across the entire organization, because whether it's people, process, technology, we have to do something. And it's up to each one of us to make that work.
And that's a great segue. I mentioned at the start, we'll be doing a couple of polls. So we're going to release the first poll now. And the question will be, has your office or your workplace engaged in any formal training for staff in cybersecurity? So just have a go at that, and we'll come back to the answers as we go through. But Sean, I wonder if I could continue with that point. I know you've been quite an advocate for everyone in an organisation who has any sort of decision-making capacity needing to have a fundamental understanding of cybersecurity. So as we face these increased threats, what do you think some of those biggest challenges will be ensuring that is across the whole staff base of any organisation?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of that really comes down to resilience. I think at the end of the day, when you look at resilience, it's all around how do we ensure that we've got the ability to absorb the shocks, adjust as and when needed to continue our operations. Now, if you cast your mind back, at least for me, sort of March 16th was the day where we said globally, let's send everyone home. I don't think any organisation probably really had ever planned for scaling up a remote workforce overnight and dealing with a pandemic. And then you got to think about it from a cyber context. How many people have actually planned for something actually going wrong from a cyber incident? And I think a lot of the times it's kind of a case of plan for it now. And planning for it doesn't simply mean document in the big book of plans and just have it on the shelf. It's how do you actually have regular fire drills? How do you start to go through a situation where everyone knows what they need to do? Because to use the analogy, no one ever picks their team the day of the game. So now's the time you really want to start to work out, what are the roles and responsibilities? Because when everyone's running around with their pants on fire, so to speak, no one's really going to have a look at the plan, but you've actually practiced and rehearsed and you kind of know what everyone needs to do. So I think this is where get ahead of it and start to think about how do I become resilient from this type of thing? And that starts at the top.
I love that analogy of the fire drill, and I've heard that you mentioned that before, and I think that particularly, Asha, is a great way to think about how we're going about addressing that skills gap. What do you see some of the most common mistakes that we're making, and how are we going about helping those that are trying to upskill in their cybersecurity capabilities address those? How do we get the settings for fire drill right?
Okay, so one of the things that we teach in the Master of Cybersecurity at RMIT, that's a plug there, is risk management. So a lot of things, I have been teaching that for a long time, and I've realized that a lot of being secure is managing risk. So being aware of your risks, and it could be as simple as checking your credit card statement at the end of the month. So it starts with very, very simple things. I remember the last couple of things we have been talking about is things like the Slip, Slop, Slap campaign, which was run by the government to keep us more secure from skin cancers. And also, so that is maybe something that we should try. I know that at RMIT, we do run drills for phishing attacks because social engineering, and as we say, people are the weakest link. So social engineering is the most common way in which people get into computers. So that is where we have to start thinking with the same thought pattern as we would for walking across a road.
Yeah.
Look right, look left.
Absolutely. And looking at the poll results, really telling. So has your office engaged in formal training? Yes, 46%, but no, 54%. So we've still got a long way to go to getting fire drills and formalised training really embedded in our culture. So Sean, what do you think those core skills are? What are the Oz Cyber, and we heard Michaela Cash last week or this week rather talking about this massive skills shortage. What do we need to do differently to address that? What do you see either working here well or what we can take from best practice overseas, perhaps?
Yeah, look, it definitely is a multifaceted, challenge and problem that we've got, because we need to think about how do we build the next cyber warriors, for lack of a better term. But I think we also need to think about how do we build an ecosystem where people can actually start to build a cybersecurity industry here in Australia. I'd like to see that more and more, and obviously that's a big part of what our cyber is really focused on. But I think from a defending ourselves, defending our nation, defending our own organisations that we actually work for, it really comes down to a couple of elements. And I think it's focused on people, process, and technology. From the people side of it, it's really around that sort of awareness and education. If I think back, 5+ years, cybersecurity awareness literally was an online course that many organizations probably had, where it was, click next 5 times or 10 times and you got a certificate at the end and it's like, you're compliant. And, compliance doesn't equal security. So I think it's more, it's making sure that people understand, one, what the problem actually is, but actually relating it to them, personalizing, contextualizing it to their own world. You know, I've seen many times where people talk about, you know, credential harvesting as a threat. And if I spoke to someone in security, in a security practitioner, they'd go, oh, I know what you talk about. You're collecting all of these credentials, the username, passwords. If you go talk to someone that's probably in payroll that has no idea about cybersecurity, they're going to think that I'm a farmer because I use the word harvesting. So it's actually trying to relate it to their own world. But then at the same time, educate people in a way where, how could we teach them what to do about protecting their own family, their own information when they're at home? You know, from an organizational standpoint, setting the scene and the tone from the top. You know, we look up to our leaders in an organization, and if they're not practicing and preaching and really sort of setting the tone for what a security culture should be, I'm never going to follow anyone else. You know, if they're the ones that break all the rules, guess what? Good chance we're probably going to end up breaking the rule as well. So it's making sure that it does set from the top. And more we're seeing these targeted attacks taking place. We're seeing people, you know, forgot to turn the light switch off, and all of a sudden that's a way that someone can actually get inside an organization. And that's where we just constantly have to be vigilant and on guard. So that's why it's a systematic way of just constantly teaching and educating people. You know, there's not one size fits all, and, you know, do it once, set it, forget it, and you're done. We really have to keep it sort of chipping away.
And Asha, in now, yeah, obviously RMIT has a wonderfully industry embedded educational model across the board. In any of the partners we're working with that are part of the programs you're responsible for, are you seeing some really great benchmarked best practice to the points that Sean's made there?
I'm not sure, because we get them to come in and talk and, you know, get them to talk to the students. So, and of course, it runs on what is called Chatham House rules. So in many ways, I can't share what they say.
Trying to get it out of you. That was a test. Well done.
It's really good, because, you know, it allows them to share ideas and to tell people what could work and what hasn't worked, and how they have dealt with it. So, you know, for cybersecurity students, that's very important to know. You know, what doesn't work.
A good segue into our second poll, which will pop up now. And this is really looking at those internal security processes. So the question will be, are you confident that your internal staff adhere to security processes and understand what they need to do? And there's a range there, 25% understand, 50% understand, or 75% or more understand. So jump into that poll in the next 60 seconds or so, and we'll revisit the results in a moment. I want to just change tack a little bit, Asha. I loved your work in gender equity, and yeah, nowhere more important perhaps than STEM more broadly. But obviously women are very underrepresented in cybersecurity particularly. And so how do we encourage that diversity? It's crazy that 50% of the population isn't as involved. You know, so what are some of the things that you think are necessary there?
Okay, so it's something that relates to mathematics as well. So we have the similar problem there. And I always think of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the US attorney, said. She basically said, Supreme Court judge, sorry, she said that, you know, when there are enough of us, then we will no longer be a curiosity. So we need more women, and we do have. So the good thing about RMIT, the RMIT cybersecurity, is we have more females in there teaching than men. So that's already, and that has been the case right from it started. The degree started in 2000. So for 20 years, we've always had more women teaching than men, and we try, and when we get industry speakers, we try and get more females. At some points, it's to the extent that we're now looking for male speakers.
So Sean, do you see this as a really systemic problem as well? What are some of the things you're seeing in the industry, and what's Palo Alto Networks doing proactively or otherwise?
Yes, I think the statistic that I've seen worldwide, I think females actually make up 11%, kind of the demographic of worldwide in terms of sort of working inside cybersecurity, which is just mind-blowing in itself that it's actually only 11%. So if anything, it's more trying to encourage people to get in there. And I think a lot of the times people tend to think cybersecurity, it's you know, a technical thing. You need to purely focus on, you know, building technology, being an engineer, being a range of different things. And I think it's cybersecurity is so broad and wide, and there's a lot of different things that it actually encompasses. And if you think about it from let's call it the technical side is one part, and I'll probably keep that as one side, because You can talk about STEM and a whole range of other areas that people are trying to sort of do in the industry, and even as an organization we do as well. We're trying to sort of foster that. But if you think about how do we actually try and engage people, and to the earlier point that we talked about, sort of the security awareness side of it, that's still security. And there's no reason why you can't actually focus on that, because it's actually understanding people. It's actually understanding behavior and how do you change people's behaviors. I think where I've seen people really succeed, and this is kind of like an open invitation to say, if you are the curious, person, you've got the curious mind, cybersecurity has a role for you. You need people that actually think outside of the box. If you're a communicator, our biggest challenge half the time is trying to communicate challenges like risk. Risk in cyber, risk in general is all about how do I as it pertains to cyber, how do I accept it, avoid it, mitigate it, transfer it? You've got 4 choices. What would you like to do?
Yes.
And try to convert let's call it the business side of it to technical and technical to business. That is an amazing requirement that we have right now. We need
Absolutely.
people. There's not enough people.
I think, sorry, Asha, you were going to say?
Yeah, absolutely. What Sean is saying is absolutely right. So just thinking that, that cybersecurity is all technical, that is so wrong. It reads people with all sorts of skills. And, what I say to students is find your niche.
Yep.
There are as many niches as there are people. Find your niche. Don't be what everybody else wants to be. Be what you want to be. So you have to, it does take effort. It takes thinking from you. You can't just follow, the path that everybody else is following. And you have to think about, where do I fit in? Where do I want to fit in?
I think there's a couple of questions just to jump to just one out of sequence from students in the audience today. Say, well, how do I get into a career in cybersecurity? What I'm really hearing is that everyone should have cybersecurity as part of their skill set, as part of their toolkit they carry. Any specific sort of guidance for some of those that might be students or might be looking to reskill on the forum today?
Yes, so there's a lot of there are a lot of meetups. There are a lot of there's a lot of free stuff out there. So it all starts with you going and finding out, to learning for yourself. And and as I usually tell people, information security or cybersecurity is a niche market, in the sense that not that there are fewer people in it, but in the fact that it builds on what you're already qualified to do. So you should not think of it as I'm here and cybersecurity is over there. You need to think about, okay, I'm here. How do I get cybersecurity into my role and show your industry where you are sitting, or whatever you're qualified, if you have an undergraduate degree, show people how cybersecurity fits in.
Yeah, and it's to that point as well. I think that's where sometimes we see cybersecurity as this thing. We go off and we teach technology. We teach, some of the abstract pieces around it as well. I think the part that people tend to miss is cyber in general is a vector for good and bad things to happen. We need to work out, how do we intrinsically build that as part of every single thing that we do? Because the reality is, it's already part of everything that we do today. And if you think about it, if you're a lawyer, you probably turn around and go, cybersecurity means absolutely nothing to me. I turn around and say, cybersecurity means absolutely everything to you. What does a lawyer do? They hold information. They may, and typically, lawyers are risk averse because they manage risk all the time. That's their job, but it's what they do. They will probably be laggards when it comes to using technology, and they rely on a wealth of information in front of them to build their actual case. That's exactly the reason why you need to be thinking about security and work out, how does security apply to the context of my world? And you could take any other job, any other industry, security has a role to play. And it's the point that Asha mentioned earlier around sort of that whole, the slip, stop, slaps type of campaigns and things like that. Take your pick. We've got many campaigns that we probably all remember as kids growing up. But think about it, click, clack, front and back. I still put a seatbelt on every single time I go into a car. Why? Because the jingle still plays in my head. And I still remember it, in my 40s. We need to have that seatbelt analogy in our brain every single time that we go online. How do I ensure that I'm doing something safe and secure? That same applies when I'm actually doing something at work as well.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the poll result, just to circle back to that, we had that, are you confident with internal staff adhering to security processes in your organisation? up to 50%. You know, we had 47% of the audience said that, 25% confidence at 31% of the audience, and only 22% felt that 75% or more complied to security processes. So I guess in that context, that there's a bit of a gap between what we believe or what our CISOs and others tell us is necessary. When we've moved to remote working, what do you think some of the biggest challenges have been? What are the things that at the top of a CISO or a CTO's list that are keeping them awake at night?
For me, I feel that, what has happened is from working from home, we have come out. So we are now working outside of our enterprise security. So we are no longer connected to that sort of umbrella. So if you had good cybersecurity systems at work, and I know RMIT does, we are outside that, which means we have to be even more careful. And as I say, one of the reasons why I like to use the word information security instead of cybersecurity, because people forget that we are also information. We are made up of information. It's not just that passport, that Medicare card, our medical histories, everything is information. And if we lose that information, if that information is stolen, think of how hard it is to get it back. How hard it is to prove you are who you are. How do you prove? Just think, how do you prove you are who you are? You take bits of information. You can't just turn up and say, I am. I can't turn up and say, I'm Asha Rao, and they'll say, yeah, right, who says so?
And so you're sort of saying the same thing, Sean? I mean, I know there's a couple of questions coming in around of data security and different, we've got things like the GDPR, and we all select accept on an app because we want to use the app. What's the social engineering change we need to really be advocating for here?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things, and I don't know, I think I probably also sort of challenged the notion a little bit around what Asha mentioned. I think working from home is just simply, it's made us actually work remotely from where, let's call it that umbrella that Asha mentioned. But I think what it ends up creating is an opportunity rather than anything else to really extend the umbrella and the protection that's out there. I think processes definitely have been probably challenged working from home. Because you're actually working in isolation, you don't have the ability to talk to someone next to you and ask the question. And if you do see, let's just say, an email that looks a little bit suspicious, you tend to probably ask someone in the office and go, hey, does this look right? So people can be challenged a little bit more working remotely. But if I think about what's really transpired over the last 20 plus weeks or whatever it actually is now, I think there's three distinct phases that every organization will go through. The first phase was, how do I rapidly scale up a remote workforce? Some struggled more than others to actually get that to work. The third phase is really around, how do I go back and test all of my processes, procedures, and really try and enhance kind of the way that the new world order that's actually out there. Do the fire drills, test people, see if they're actually a little bit more diligent at working from home, and they've got extra vigilance of ensuring that they can keep an eye on what's going on. The third phase in, let's call it the post-COVID world, is if you think about people, process, and technology, I think a lot of it is going to be centered around people. And you think about it, we've always been, people go to work. I think we need to work out how do we deliver work to people. All of that is through technology. I think the definition of a campus, a office, a branch office, a remote worker has fundamentally changed. We're doing more and more things out in the cloud. We're using Zoom as a piece of technology right now. We rely on, Google and Microsoft and a whole bunch of other players out there. So kind of that perimeter has just moved out. So for me, kind of take what Asha said and say, I think that umbrella has just actually been extended. But my job as a security practitioner is to work out, how do I ensure that when my data is no longer in, one place, it's in hundreds of places. I've got data islands everywhere. I need to work out, how do I secure all these pieces and ensure that, Matt, when you're at home, you're connected and you're secure and you're safe, as does Asha, because I've now just increased my attack surface, because I've now got thousands of workers that are out there that the attackers are basically coming directly to you, as opposed to coming to our main sort of umbrella, if that makes sense.
So sort of that, not distinguishing between the work and the personal, but actually having a holistic view of your digital literacy, your information security, Asha, to your language. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I guess I'm really intrigued by that, because I know I've got a Google phone, and the AI and machine learning that's now just built into that is becoming something that I begin to take for granted. I get calls and it tells me it's possible spam. How are those sorts of technology, increasing that ability to combat threats sort of before we have to act on it? How do we leverage that better? What do you see coming down that line, Asha?
Can you repeat that question? I got distracted by a comment.
And it's wonderful. Please, audience, keep them coming through. We'll shift after this question to those. But I'm interested in the AI and ML. How do we get those amazing technologies that are racing ahead to help both increase that literacy level but how do we make sure that we're still making sure people are making good decisions, You
see, one of the things I found I have a Google phone as well, and I found that the good thing is if I get a call from an unknown number, and sometimes Google will come up with a message saying this is possibly a spam call. And that is what AI and ML are doing. They're actually alerting you to that, which is really good. So on the same thing of my home line, if I get a call from an anonymous number, I will not answer because I'm not certain. Just in some ways, I trust my mobile phone better than my home phone.
Yeah. And Sean, do you see those AI machine learning technologies really playing a much more active role, like the spam calls and other things in many more ways through our work and personal lives?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think just in sort of the cybersecurity context alone, we leverage machine learning, have been leveraging machine learning for many, many years. If I think back to my beginnings in the security industry, back in 2000, I worked at an antivirus company where, we had 500,000 pieces of malware or malicious software in our database that we'd collected from the previous 20 years. Fast forward today to 2020, probably every single security vendor in the planet will actually receive in excess of 500,000 net new pieces of malware a day. And where machine learning has actually helped us is helping really identify kind of the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to malicious software. A couple of different techniques. One would be you've got all this vast amount of data that's actually in there, and I can basically teach the machine, so to speak, to say, go off and find the new pieces of malware that are there. If I know the question, I'm going to say, go off and find the answer in that pool of data. Now, if I don't know the question and I don't know the data and I don't know the answer, the first thing I'm probably going to do is use a technique called clustering. And I'm going to say, you're green, you're red, you're blue. So in theory, if I drop a piece of malware in the middle, I'm going to say, who do you look like? And that's how we've basically used just to identify malicious software. That's one way. And you think that's how it's actually helped us, because we can't keep up with the sheer volume of the threats that are there. But then if you think about the vast amounts of information that we're collecting every aspect of life, it's all about how do we make our lives better? Because we can't simply have a person sitting at the screen trying to work out, okay, what do we do here?
Where do we put that?
So we need to teach the machines to actually do a lot of this work for us. And that's where, if I think that's where, an area of focus that people want to think about, how do I get into the industry and what should I focus on? Go be a data scientist. Like that's where the money is going to be for the next.
And that's So both data science and analytics are part of RMIT in the School of Science, and analytics is from mathematics as well. So both cybersecurity and are coming out, and we're trying now, because most of the jobs are requiring in cybersecurity are requiring a mash up or a mix of these two things. You can't, with huge amount of data, you need how to deal with that data.
Yeah. Look, and that's terrific. Really appreciate your thoughts there. So in the last few minutes, we've got probably just under 10 minutes left. I just want to take a couple of audience questions. One that jumped out to me, and I was getting distracted as well, Asha. So it's apology accepted. We've all got limited resources. So there was one there around manufacturing and small businesses. Sean, I wonder if I could throw this to you. Where should a small business running hard to keep alive, to make inroads in their industry, where should they focus their resources when they are constrained in terms of cybersecurity, information security?
Yep. So I think first and foremost, the big thing actually is know that you actually are a target. Thinking that actually that only the top end of town, you know, governments and the like are the ones that only get targeted, I think is a myth. That never is the case. As a small business, you know, you are struggling and you still are targeted, and we see it all the time where people are going to be hit by ransomware. And probably the lesser known threat that I see most commonly targeting small and medium businesses is business email compromise. Sometimes technology cannot stop that. And it's more around making sure that you're aware of it, educate yourself, go off and find trusted providers that are going to be able to help you out to secure yourself from a technology standpoint. If you don't have the resources around how do we do the education or what do I do, reach out. There's people out there. Even reach out to peer groups that are in the same vertical industry. Because what targets one industry, those same threats will end up targeting the next industry and the next and the next. So there's no such thing as competing when it comes to cybersecurity. You know, the job here is not to outrun the bear and be faster than the person next to you. You know, we're all in this together, and, you know, but reach out and leverage the support that are around you. From a technology standpoint, the final thing I'll probably add there is, whether you're a big organization or small, buying 101 different products to try and cobble them together to solve the security challenges has not worked for us in the past. And as a small business, you have even less time and less ability and capability to do that. So work out a better way of actually trying to solve them. And again, trusted partners in that space.
Yeah, great point. I think that limited budget, limited resources, it's pretty tough.
The fascinating thing is, at this point, I have a master's by research student who was a small business owner, who is working on how do we give a solution to small business on cybersecurity. And that has been most of the risk management work that I've done is in the area of small business.
Yep.
And so I guess just to keep going on that one, another question, Asha, was it changes so quickly. Yeah, how do we keep a curriculum? How do we keep a skills focus that is actually contemporary, on the edge of what we need to be educating for? What do we do there?
See, with cybersecurity, as with everything else, you know, you have to be a lifelong learner. You can't think. So one of the things, if you're by doing a master's or a master's degree, it gives you the foundation. It gives you what is called the mile deep view of stuff. And you have the skills in there. So you should not think, oh, I don't have any of these skills. No, go and think. It all comes to thinking and learning through your life, looking at stuff and connecting the dots. You know, becoming a little bit of a machine learner, you know, doing that, you know, this is you know, red, blue, and green. Where should this thought fall? I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'm clicking my mouse. I'm moving my mouse. Should I click?
Yes. Yeah. So that human component is so critical. Yeah.
It is. So, you know, when I started teaching information security at RMIT all those years ago, it was very much, and even Bruce Schneier, who's considered one of the gurus of information security, said he thought, you know, cryptography, mathematics is the solution. And then I know now, we need that. We need the mathematics, we need the cryptography. That's the engine that holds. But everything around it, you know, defense in depth means that we need to know. Humans are the weakest link. Humans will always remain the weakest link. So each of us humans, you know, we are humans. I hope so.
Hope so. Well, and that probably, we might, and just look at the time, we've probably got this is the last couple of minutes. I wondered if, in closing, Sean, given that we're all humans on this call, a few hundred of us, what would be the three things that you would suggest everyone should leave this hour, this 45 minutes with us, and do differently, think about and actually act on?
Yeah, I think the first part is definitely sort of that phrase, do different. I live by that all the time. Challenge yourself to actually do something different. To use the famous quote by Albert Einstein, you know, doing the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. That's what some people still do today to solve security challenges. This is the way that I've always done it, so let me keep on doing it. It's going to fail because at some point someone will eventually get in. You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, an attacker needs to be right only once, and we need to be right 100% of the time. One, keep yourself aware and educate as to what's actually going on out there. You know, ransomware definitely takes up a lot of the airwaves and the media when it comes to say this is the biggest threat, and it is a big threat. Business email compromise, I'm seeing a lot of people basically being hit. And if you think about it, especially in an economic downturn that we're going through, You know, losing $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 because you've inadvertently sent it to a third party, that literally could make or break one of the 2.3 million small businesses that we have that serve this underbelly of the country. So keep yourself aware of what's going on out there. Two, from an organizational standpoint, do different. You know, think about the way that you've been doing it. These challenges will not slow down. And I think it's debatable as to whether or not, are they getting worse, are they more, is it this, is that? The reality is we're talking about it a lot more, which I think is good. Find other like-minded people that are willing to, you know, share their learnings. You know, if it's Chatham House Rules type of event that you're going to, great. Learn from others. Ask questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I think the final piece that I probably would suggest is keep learning. You know, the concept of resharpening the sword for me is just like massive. You know, think about different ways of, you know, learning different things. What's coming over the horizon? What's something that we should be thinking about? You know, quantum computing will become a reality someday. How does that apply to me right now? You know, you think about other areas that we're going to be focusing on. Working from home as an example. This is probably going to be the reality for a while. So how do I make it work? What could I do differently? How do I still secure everything that we do? But then think about it. Attackers have not abated their willingness to try and get in. The moment that we all switched to working from home, they started targeting our home routers. Guess what? They know that we're all sitting behind them. So start challenging yourself that there are different models that we need to think about. Leverage the cloud because it is and has an infinite compute power to try and solve all of these challenges for us as well.
How about you, Asha? There's some great points there. What would be some things you think people need to do?
Very simple. Take responsibility for your own security. It may not work 100% of the time, but if it works 50% of the time, you are much more secure. So think, just take 2 seconds, 10 seconds before you click on something, before you look at something, before you believe something. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. That's all I ask. That's what I say to people. That's what keeps you secure. It's just that gap. You know, it's like they used to say, two different one thing is before you yell at someone, count to 10. You know, apply that to cybersecurity.
Yeah, write the email, write the angry email before you send it is always my one. But look, looking at the time, look, thank you so much. That really flew. I really want to thank both the panelists, Asha, Sean, for your time, and you know, really I guess the call to arms that you've given each and everyone on the session today. Give a virtual round of applause in the window. Make sure, as you heard, that we do different. Take that time. Take a pause before you click, before you forward, before you act, because these are things that can take away your livelihood, whether that's professional and your business or personal in terms of identity and what have you. As I mentioned at the start, we have recorded the session. It'll be sent out shortly to everybody. And if you'd like to share it with anyone, please do so. No Chatham House rules today. This is all about spreading the goodness of what we believe is a really important message around cybersecurity and the future of it. Touch base on future events. Don't hesitate to hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Insta. And of course, if anyone interested in further study, jump into the cybersecurity courses at RMIT Online, RMIT, and certainly the new Cyber Ready Cloud Innovation Centre that RMIT has established with AWS and other partners. So thank you very much. Thank you again, my esteemed panelists. Wonderful discussion, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sean.